Hey friends, today we're going to be making some southern cornbread dressing from scratch, and I thought I'd show you guys how I do this. And we're going to be adding some chicken into this one because it's going with my husband to work so he can feed his crew with this, so it'll be a little bit more of a meal. But we're going to start out with that chicken in the Instant Pot. I'm going to add in some water here, a little bit of bullion that's back there. I'm going to season the chicken with garlic salt, a little rosemary, some lemon pepper, and then we're going to add some water in here and cook it for 15 minutes. Okay, you can see that I generously sprinkled that over the chicken, and then I added the chicken broth as well, or the chicken broth powder. I am going to save this broth. Normally I would be making a bone broth for my homemade dressing, but today we are kind of in a rush to get it done by tomorrow, so we are going to go ahead and do it this way today. So we'll get the lid on here and let that cook for 15 minutes at high pressure. Okay, now we are starting on our homemade cornbread. We have 2 cups of all-purpose flour here, 1 cup of cornmeal, 1.5 tablespoons of baking powder, and we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, and that's our dry ingredients. We have 1 1/4 cup of milk, 1/2 cup of melted butter, and I'm going to add 1/2 cup of olive oil to this. We have a little bit of honey. We're going to add in about 3 tablespoons of this, and we have 3 eggs. So I'm going to go ahead and add all of our dry ingredients together and get them mixed up, and then I'm going to add all of the wet ingredients together in a bowl, whisk it up, and then I'll add it in with our dry. Okay, now I am using unsalted butter. This recipe calls for salted butter, so we went ahead and bumped up that salt measurement to 1.5 teaspoons instead of 1 teaspoon. So now we're going to get our wet ingredients in here. Okay, now you need to get all of your ingredients mixed in together. When you mix this, just mix it until it's all blended in. Just don't over mix it, because that can make your cornbread just a little bit tough. So I'm going to go ahead and get this mixed in, and I'll be right back. Okay, now we've got it all nice and mixed in. I've went ahead and sprayed this pan down with a little bit of spray. Ignore the lima beans soaking over there. We're having ham and lima bean soup for dinner, so it's not part of this recipe, but we're going to get this in our pan, and we're going to add this to a 350-degree oven for 35 to up to 55 minutes, depending on your oven. Okay, so we have our cornbread in the oven baking. Our chicken is finished, and I've been letting it sit here and cool off a little bit. You can see that it smells delicious, and it's easy to shred. So we're going to get this out of the broth. We're going to save that broth for our dressing, and we're going to get that chicken shredded up. And we're also working on some homemade cream of chicken soup. So we have 1/2 cup of flour here. We have 1/2 of a teaspoon of onion powder. We have 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. We have 2 cups of chicken broth here. And we have 1 cup of milk. We're also going to be using 4 tablespoons of butter. And we're going to be making this on the stovetop. And it's very similar to making a gravy. Okay, our cornbread is finished. Our pick was coming out clean, so that's how you know when it's done. We have our chicken shredded. So now we are going to work on our cream of chicken soup. We've got our butter over here, heating that up. Once this is good and melted, we will start adding in our flour. Okay, once it's melted and you start seeing that foam on your butter, it's ready to add in some of your flour. You can start out slow if you want to. Get that whisked in. You want to get those clumps out of there as fast as possible. Now at this stage, you're basically just making a roux. which is a flour and fat mixture. I have this heat on low, but this is a propane stove, so it's a little bit hotter than your average stovetop. I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of that flour in there. And we have our seasoning in here already. Now, I haven't added salt in here at this point because remember, your bouillon, if you're using bouillon, is usually pretty salty on its own. So you need to wait a little while until you add that in towards the end, so you don't end up with it being too salty. Now, we've reached that paste stage, so we're really ready to go ahead and start adding in our liquids. We're going to let this sit here and sizzle for just a second. Some people believe in browning their roux, some don't. It's really up to you. You don't have to. We'll give it a few minutes like this. Okay, I've let that cook for a few minutes. So now we're going to add in our chicken broth first. I'm going to add just a little bit and try to hurry up and get this flour mixture worked in. You want to get any of those clumps out of there. It's already starting to thicken up. Hopefully you can see that. Starting to look like a cream of soup, huh? Now you can do this with basically any type of broth that you have, or you can do it with mushroom. Ooh. Now we're going to go ahead and add in the rest of that chicken broth. See if I can do this without making a mess. Ooh, there it went. I am really good at making messes, if you haven't figured that out yet. Now once you get all of that really nice and worked in, and you don't see any more clumps, then you can go ahead and add in your milk. That's going to give it its nice creamy taste. This is so much healthier than that stuff in the store in the cans, especially if you're trying to avoid a lot of preservatives and bioengineered foods. Okay, we've got it pretty smooth. Now we're going to add in our milk. And what you're seeing floating on top of that milk, that's butter. This is the same cup I had that butter in. That's all it is, so that's just fine. Remember, we used 4 tablespoons of butter making that roux for this, so it's all okay. Alright, we've got it really nice and smooth, and now it's time for it to sit here and simmer for a few minutes. You want to keep stirring it like this. Keep scraping that bottom to make sure that you don't have anything sticking. And just be patient with it. It'll turn out, I promise. Now you can add some pepper into this if you like. You can add some celery salt if you like. Both of those things taste really nice in this. But we're doing it just simple today. And don't forget, if it's not salty enough, you can add a little bit of salt. But I'm going to continue to do this, and I'll bring you back when it's almost done. Okay. So we're just about there. You can see she's thick. So the longer you cook this, the more it will thicken up. And also, after you go ahead and stop cooking it, it's still going to thicken just a little bit. So remember that if you want it to be just a little bit thinner, don't cook it as long, okay? But we're almost to where I want it, so I think we're going to shut it off and let her sit here and cool. I'll get you a little bit closer so you can see that. See that consistency? Okay, so that is our homemade cream of chicken soup. Now, if you use the canned soups, that's fine. I'm not knocking on that. I just wanted to show you guys how to work with this flour. And I am going to be hashtagging this on flouritup for Martin Midlife Misadventures and their little series that they're doing with the flour and teaching people how to use it. So I thought maybe you guys would want to learn this if you don't already know. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get this turned off, and then we're going to start working on our dressing. Okay, so we're getting our cornbread over here in the bowl. I have reserved some on the side. I will use it if I have to, but if not, we're going to enjoy this for dinner. Usually you don't need the whole pan of cornbread when you're adding in your chicken. We're going to be adding some celery and also some onion. So that's going to fill out the pan a little bit more, but if you just want some good cornbread, guys, this is just, it's so delicious. Try this recipe, but this is the one that we hang on to. We love this recipe, so try it out. Now I'm going to get the onion chopped up. I'm going to go ahead and get this really nice and crumbled up, and then I'm going to add in our celery here in a few minutes, and I will show you how much I'm adding in just a second. Okay, this is the part that I can't be exactly exact about. You kind of have to go by intuition with this. I've added in 2 really large handfuls of chicken. I've added in a handful of celery. Now this celery was pre-frozen, so I made sure I squeezed the water out of it. And we have 1, I would say, small onion. We have 1 teaspoon of sage, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/8 of a teaspoon of rosemary. And we're going to go ahead and get this mixed up, and we're going to taste it. And then we're going to add in a little bit of our cream of chicken soup. And if it still needs a little bit more moisture, we can add in, as it cooks, some of that chicken broth that we reserved. Okay, the seasonings are good. It tastes like it needs to taste for our traditional dressing. So we're going to add in a little bit of our cream of chicken soup, and this will add the moisture, most of the moisture that it needs. It's going to start out looking pretty wet, but that's what you want to get a really nice dressing. So we've added already 3 of those spoonfuls there. I'm gonna mix this in and see how much more it needs. I think the best thing I can tell you on this part is add just a little bit more than a cup in here, because usually for this size of a pan, if I were using the can of soup, I would use 1 can. This recipe back here makes 2 cans worth. So add in just a little bit more than a cup, or just right at a cup. And this could use just a little bit of salt. So I'm going to add a little bit of garlic salt on top. And then I'm going to get that mixed in. Sorry for my arm in the camera. We're almost done. Alright, we have it where we want it. We can take it and form it like that. It's ready to go in the pan. Okay, we've got it in our pan. We're going to add this to a 400-degree oven. The total cook time on this is up to an hour. I usually cook it for 30 minutes. I remove it and then I'll fluff it with a fork, and then I'll put it back in. And I may add a little bit more chicken onto the top also before it's completely finished. So I'm getting it in the oven right now. Okay, we are halfway through and I've pulled the pan out and started fluffing this back up. You see how it pulls away from the side? It's getting there. But we'll get this nice and fluffed back up and then spread it out evenly again, and then we'll stick her back in the oven. Alright, now we're going to get this in the oven for at least another 25 minutes. Alright friends, we are finished. Hopefully you can see that. There we go, now the color is finally showing. I don't want to pull too much of this out for it. It's not for us right now, it's for the work crew, but you can see what it looks like. It's nice and moist, but it has the crispiness on the top and the bottom. Very delicious. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you all again soon. If you haven't watched my friends over at Martin Midlife Adventures, please go over there and check out their channel. They are awesome friends. I love them. They help you with everything as far as prepping and cooking. And they're just some of the most loving people I've ever met in my life. Or not met in person, but on here. So head over there and check them out. I think you'll love them. And watch their Flour It Up series with all the channels participating. But anyway, I'll see you guys again soon. I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving. Bye, friends.